The first thing I noticed when I came to wasn't the ceiling. It was Rosie Callahan, my ex-girlfriend's younger sister, sitting in the chair beside my bed with her knees pulled to her chest and a paper coffee cup balanced on the armrest like she'd forgotten it was there. Her mascara had done what mascara does when someone cries for a long time and then tries to pretend they haven't. Her hair was in a ponytail that had given up halfway through. When she saw my eyes open, she made a sound, not quite a word, and pressed one hand over her mouth. That was how I knew this wasn't a normal situation. Not you rear-ended someone normal. Not you forgot to pay your electric bill normal. This was the kind of wrong that sits in a person's posture before it reaches their face. "Hey," she whispered. My throat felt like gravel in a tin can. I moved my arm to push myself up and discovered that my left shoulder had opinions about that. "Don't," Rosie said, already reaching for the cup with the bendy straw on the side table. Small sips. I took the water because apparently whatever had happened to me had also happened to my pride. For the record, I'm 31. I own a small tile and stone company in Columbus. We do custom bathroom renovations, kitchen backsplashes, high-end fireplace surrounds for people who say things like, "I wanted to feel Mediterranean but not busy." I've grouted enough travertine to tile a highway. I am not a man who gets spoon-fed water easily. In that hospital bed, I felt about 14. "What happened?" I managed. Rosie set the cup down carefully. "There was an accident." I looked at the IV in my arm, the compression sleeve on my leg, the monitor blinking beside me like an impatient metronome. "That tracked." "What kind?" "Your van." She glanced toward the door, then back. "You were on Route 40 coming off the job site. It was icy. They think you hit black ice going over the overpass." They think. That phrase landed with a specific weight. "Rosie." I looked at her directly. "Why are you here?" She went very still. That was the thing about Rosie Callahan. She was 26 and she taught second grade, and she cried at insurance commercials, and she had never once in her life successfully hidden a feeling from anyone in the same zip code. Her face right now was working overtime to contain something it had no business containing. "I was called," she said. "By who?" A nurse came in before she could answer. Middle-aged woman, calm hands, name badge that said Patricia. She checked my vitals, asked me the standard questions: name, date, current president. I answered all three correctly, which felt like an accomplishment given the state of my shoulder. After she left, I looked at Rosie again. "Your parents are on their way from Pittsburgh," she said. "Your brother's driving from Akron." That's not an answer to my question. Her eyes filled. She looked down at the coffee cup, then back at me, and the room changed the way rooms do when someone is about to say a true thing. "Rosie." "She called me," she said quietly. "When the hospital contacted her, she called me first. The monitor caught my heartbeat doing something it hadn't been doing a second ago." "Sasha called you." Rosie nodded, one small miserable nod. "Sasha Callahan, my ex. We'd been broken up for 14 months. Not because we'd fallen out of love. That would have been simpler, would have left cleaner edges. We broke up because I worked 60-hour weeks and called it ambition, and she finally told me that she didn't feel like a priority. She felt like a footnote. I told her she was wrong. She told me to prove it. I didn't. That's the short version. The longer version makes me look worse. The last thing I remembered was locking up the job site on Whitfield Avenue around 6. One of my guys had left a box of tile samples in the van that needed to go back to the supplier. I remember pulling onto Route 40. I remember the temperature had dropped fast. I remember the overpass. Then I remember nothing until Rosie's mascara. "Is she?" I stopped. Started again. "Is Sasha here?" Rosie's expression answered before her mouth did. "She's in the building," she said. "She's been here since they brought you in." "How long ago was that?" 4 hours. Something cold moved through me that had nothing to do with the IV. "She's been here 4 hours and she's not in this room." Rosie looked at the doorway like she was hoping someone would walk through it and rescue her from this conversation. "Nobody obliged." "She didn't know if you'd want." "Send her in." "Owen. Please." Rosie stood slowly, pressed her hand briefly to my forearm, and left. The room was quiet except for the monitor and the sound of a television somewhere down the hall playing something cheerful at an inappropriate volume. Outside the window, Columbus in February looked like Columbus in February always looks. Low gray sky, dirty snow along the curbs. The kind of afternoon that makes you understand why people move to Arizona. The door opened. Sasha Callahan stood in the frame in a charcoal wool coat she hadn't taken off, like she'd been ready to leave at any moment. Her dark hair was loose and slightly damp. She'd been outside at some point. She had her phone in her hand, and her thumb was moving on the screen with the automatic, unconscious motion of someone who needs to be doing something with their hands. When she saw that I was awake, she stopped. For a moment, neither of us said anything. She took in the shoulder brace, the monitor, the tape on my forearm. Something moved through her face that she pulled back quickly and replaced with a more composed expression. She was not entirely successful. "Your color's better than when they brought you in," she said. "That's a low bar." "It is." She didn't move from the doorway. "How's your head?" "Crowded. How's yours?" "Same." She looked at the chair Rosie had been sitting in, then at me, then at some neutral point near my left knee that seemed to require her attention. "You can sit down," I said. "I know." "Are you going to?" "I'm deciding." "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Her mouth moved almost imperceptibly at one corner. She came to the chair and sat down with the careful posture of someone trying not to take up too much space. The coat stayed on. I watched her. 14 months is enough time for a person to become slightly unfamiliar, just around the edges. The particular way she held her shoulders was the same. The way she looked at something directly, rather than glancing at it. That was the same. The habit she had of pressing her thumbnail to the corner of her lower lip when she was thinking. I saw it now without her realizing she was doing it. "You didn't have to stay," I said. "I know that too." "But you did." She looked at me then. "I heard your name on Rosie's caller ID when the hospital called." She panicked and answered it on speaker. A beat. "She's been in my living room watching true crime documentaries for the past month. She does that when she's upset." "About what?" Sasha looked at her hands. "Among other things." I shifted, which was a mistake. Pain moved through my shoulder in a way that suggested it had more to say on the subject. "Don't," Sasha said, already leaning forward. "You've got a partial dislocation. They put it back. But if you—" I know. You don't know. You do this thing where you hear 'be careful' and interpret it as 'be slightly less reckless than you would otherwise.' That's, I thought about it, accurate." She sat back, but she'd moved the chair a few inches closer when she leaned in, and she didn't move it back. That small thing did something to me I wasn't prepared for. We had once been very good at close. Sunday mornings at her apartment on 5th, her feet tucked under my leg on the couch. Long drives on the weekends when neither of us had anywhere to be. The particular quality of silence between two people who have been together long enough not to need noise. I had told myself, in the 14 months since, that I had made peace with losing that. I had told myself a lot of things. "Why did they call you?" I asked. "The hospital." Sasha's thumb went to her lower lip again. "Your phone was in your jacket pocket. It survived the crash." "I was." She hesitated. "I was still in your contacts under S." Under S 2 years of being together, and I'd never changed her contact from her first name to a nickname or a heart emoji or any of the lazy shorthand people use for people who matter to them. Just S. Like I'd kept things easy to undo. "Sasha, you don't have to say anything." "I'm going to anyway." She looked at me. There was something in her expression that was very close to fear. Not of me, but of what I might say. Or maybe of what she might feel when I said it. "I've been trying to call you," I said. Her expression didn't change. "I know." "You didn't answer." "I know that too." 3 times. "Owen." Her voice was quiet. "I know." The monitor beeped in the silence between us. Down the hall, the television laughed at something. "I went to your building," I said. 2 weeks ago. I sat in my truck outside for 45 minutes and then I left because I couldn't figure out what I would say if you opened the door." Something shifted in her face. "I should have rung the bell," I said. Sasha stared at the blanket near my knee. Her jaw moved once. "What would you have said?" "I don't know exactly." Something like, I stopped. Started again. Something like, I understand now what you were telling me. When you said you didn't feel like a priority. I didn't understand it then because I thought working hard for something was the same as caring about it. I've been working on that. She was very still. I miss you, I said. Not in a dramatic way. I miss you in the way that I bought the wrong brand of coffee for 4 months because you were always the one who knew which one we got. I miss the specific version of quiet that only happens when you're in a room. Her eyes shone immediately. I miss that you tell me when I'm being an idiot, I said. In a way that somehow still makes me feel like you think I'm capable of not being one. She made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and something that hurt. That's... She pressed her fingers to her mouth for a moment. That's a lot to say in a hospital gown. I've had 14 months to think about it and about 45 minutes of consciousness. I'm working with what I have. Sasha looked at me for a long time. The composed expression had come down. What was underneath it was quieter and more complicated and more honest. I got your voicemails, she said. I figured. All three. I know they were long, the second one especially. I was driving back from a site in Worthington and I shook my head. I kept talking. You said you'd been to a therapist. Twice. Going again Thursday. I paused, assuming I'm discharged by then. Her mouth softened just barely. What do you talk about? Mostly about the difference between being present physically and being present actually. Apparently, I've been confusing those for most of my adult life. She pulled her coat tighter around herself even though the room wasn't cold. That's a generous summary. He's not that generous. He uses a lot of diagrams. A real sound escaped her this time. Small but genuine, and I wanted to hold on to it with both hands. The door opened, and Rosie peeked in with the guilty expression of someone who had definitely been standing in the hallway. She looked at her sister's face, then at mine, then made a decision. I'm going to get more terrible vending machine coffee, she announced, and disappeared before either of us could respond. When I looked back at Sasha, she was looking down at her hands. She missed you, Sasha said. I missed her. I paused. I missed your whole family. I know that sounds. It doesn't sound strange. She glanced up. My mom still asks about you. She pretends she's asking because she saw something about Tile on HGTV. What was the show? Does it matter? I might have done work like that. I'd like to know. She almost smiled again. It was a bathroom with heated floors. Schluter system with uncoupling membrane probably. Very reliable. You're talking about tile installation from a hospital bed. I contain multitudes. She laughed, a full one this time, surprised out of her, and for 1 second there she was. The Sasha who laughed with her whole face. The Sasha who had once spent 40 minutes explaining to me the geopolitics of her office's coffee machine situation with the focus and intensity of a foreign policy briefing. The Sasha who had kissed me in a hardware store once because I'd finally found the exact grout color she'd been describing for 2 weeks, and she looked at me like that was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done. Then the laugh faded, and she looked tired and uncertain and present in a way that made my chest ache. I don't know what to do with any of this, she said. You don't have to figure it out right now. I've been sitting in this building for 4 hours trying to figure it out. And she turned her palm over on her knee, looking at it. And I kept thinking about the last time we talked, when I said I needed you to show up for me, and you said you always showed up. I remembered that night clearly. Kitchen table. She'd been trying to tell me something, and I'd been half thinking about a job quote. I was wrong, I said. I know. She met my eyes. I also know you know that now. That's the part that's hard. What part specifically? The part where I believe you. Her voice was quiet. I don't want to believe you and be wrong again. That landed somewhere specific. That's fair, I said. It doesn't feel fair. It feels exhausting. Also fair. She looked at me with something that was half exasperated, half something warmer. You can't just agree with everything I say. I'm not. I'm agreeing with the things you're right about. Which is all of it. I held her gaze. You were right then. You're right about being careful now. I'm not asking you to fast forward. I'm asking for a conversation. Sasha was quiet for a moment. Outside, a cart rattled past in the hallway. The gray afternoon pressed against the window. What kind of conversation? She asked. The kind where I get to be honest about what I want, and you get to tell me what would have to be different. And then we figure out together if that's possible. Her thumbnail went to her lip again. Then she stopped herself, seemed to notice she was doing it, and let her hand fall. You have a partially dislocated shoulder, she said. I know. And a probable grade 2 concussion. Also aware. This isn't a great time for a significant conversation. Probably not, I agreed. But I've been waiting for a great time for 14 months, and I ended up outside your building in my truck in the dark. So maybe good enough is better than perfect. Something moved across her face. Then she reached out and rested her hand on the bed rail. Not touching me, just close. The same small almost that used to pass between us 100 times a day without either of us naming it. I want coffee that isn't from a vending machine, she said. That can be arranged. And I want you to tell me what the therapist actually said, not the summary, the actual thing. That's going to take a while. I have time. She glanced at the monitor, then back at me. Apparently. I reached over and turned my palm up on the blanket. An offer, not a demand. She looked at my hand for a long moment. Then she placed hers in it, careful, like something she was still deciding about. I kept very still so she could decide. Her fingers settled. My thumb moved once across her knuckles, and she didn't pull away. I'm sorry, I said. Her eyes went bright immediately, and I held on a little tighter. You don't have to do this while you're in pain, she said. I'm going to do it anyway. Owen. I should have rung the bell, I said again. Every time. Not just 2 weeks ago, every time I felt something and didn't say it and told myself later wasn't the right moment. I was wrong about what mattered. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the careful composure was gone entirely. I gave up on expecting you to say things like that, she said. I don't know what to do with it. You can be mad. I am mad. Okay. And she stopped. You don't have to say it right now. I know. She looked at our hands. But I want to. A breath. I still love you. I've been furious at myself for it for 14 months and it hasn't changed anything. The monitor registered my heartbeat climbing. She glanced at it. Sorry, I said. Are you? No. A laugh surprised her. She covered her mouth with her free hand. Your ribs, she said, are in excellent spirits. That's not a medical category. I'm pioneering it. She shook her head, still smiling, and it was the kind of smile that lives in a person's eyes before it reaches their mouth. I had missed that smile with a specificity that had surprised me, the way missing a particular thing always surprises you when you realize it's not just a person you lost, but every small version of them you'd stopped noticing. The door opened. A different nurse this time. Young, efficient. The kind of brisk kindness that means a busy floor. Mr. Haley. Sorry to interrupt. There are a couple things we need to go over about your imaging results, and there's also a police officer here asking about the accident. Sasha's hand tightened in mine. Police officer. I'd almost forgotten the accident itself and the larger emergency of the past 20 minutes. Give us 1 minute, I said. The nurse nodded and the door swung closed. I looked at Sasha. You okay? Why wouldn't I be? The last 5 minutes have been a lot. The last 14 months had been a lot. But she was still holding my hand. Send the officer in. I can stay if you want. I want. She stayed. The officer was young, maybe 28, with a carefully neutral expression of someone trained to read rooms without reacting to them. He introduced himself as Officer Tran, said he was wrapping up the incident report, and asked me a series of practical questions. Speed, road conditions, whether I'd been on my phone. I answered all of them. Ice on the overpass, I'd seen it too late. Speed was appropriate for conditions, which turned out to be not appropriate enough. Were you distracted at all? He asked. Before I could answer, Sasha said, he wasn't on his phone. He keeps it in the cup holder on long drives. Tran looked at her. You were in the vehicle? No. She hesitated briefly. I just know his habits. He wrote something down. Is there anything else about the moments before the accident that either of you can add? I thought about Route 40. The way the overpass had looked different than usual. The surface too smooth, the correction I tried to make. The signage on that stretch is bad, I said. No black ice warning even though temperatures had been dropping for 6 hours. I'd driven that overpass 100 times and I didn't see it coming. Tran nodded, made a note, gave me his card. We may follow up if the city submits a review on the signage issue. Could be relevant. He looked between us. Hope you feel better soon. When he left, the room was quieter than it had been before. The signage thing, Sasha said. What? You noticed that. That's the kind of thing you always noticed. She said it like she was recounting evidence. You drove a different route home from my parents' house for 3 months because a left turn signal was timed badly and you thought someone was going to get hurt. Someone did, eventually. I know. You called the city. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. You paid attention to things in the world. I always thought that was… She stopped. What? A version of caring that you couldn't apply to people. That hit directly and accurately. Working on it, I said. I know. Her thumb moved against mine. That's the thing, Owen. I believe you. She met my eyes. That's what scared me, sitting in this hallway for 4 hours, that I'd go in and you'd say something honest and I'd believe it immediately, because I know you well enough to know the difference. Is that bad? It's terrifying, she said. But it's also… She exhaled. It's also the reason I came in. I turned her hand over and pressed my mouth to her palm. Just briefly. She went still. Then her fingers curved slightly against my cheek. Careful, she whispered. I'm being very careful. You have a concussion. I was in love with you before the concussion. Her eyes widened at the tense. I said. Present tense, I got confused. Sasha looked at me for a long, quiet moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed my forehead, just above the bandage there. Her mouth was warm, and she lingered for just a second longer than she needed to. That, she said, pulling back, her voice slightly unsteady, get you a dinner. When you're discharged. What kind of dinner? The kind where you don't talk about tile for more than 20 minutes. That's a tight window. You'll manage. What if I want to talk about you instead? She looked at me. Something softened all the way to the back of her eyes. That's allowed, she said. Rosie came back 20 minutes later carrying 4 packages of vending machine peanut butter crackers and a Diet Coke she hadn't asked either of us if we wanted. She looked at our joined hands, at her sister's face, and made a sound that was entirely too emotional for a Tuesday. Rosie, Sasha said. I'm fine. She was clearly not fine. I'm just very… Crackers? Thank you, I said. She dropped into the chair on the other side of my bed, pulled her knees up, and ripped open a package. Are we good? She asked the room. Broadly. Broadly, Sasha said. Because I spent 4 hours in a hallway eating a granola bar that tasted like cement, and someone should have a good outcome from tonight. You could have gone home, Sasha said. I was not going home. Rosie pointed at me with a cracker. You scared us. Both of us. I want that on the record. It's on the record, I said. She nodded and ate the cracker. Then, after a moment, also you need better tires on that van. I've said this. You haven't. I've been thinking it loudly. Sasha laughed beside me, and I felt it through our joined hands. My parents arrived around 9:30, my mom with a travel mug of coffee she'd made at home, and carried through Pittsburgh traffic like a candle in a windstorm. My dad shook my good hand and looked at Sasha with an expression I recognized. Cautious hope. The specific kind a parent carries for their kid's happiness. My brother Joel showed up an hour later with a grocery bag of things he thought a hospital room needed. A phone charger, a better pillow, and a bag of the specific brand of chips I'd liked since I was 12. He looked at Sasha with considerably less subtlety than my dad. Oh, thank God, he said. Joel, I said. What? I'm just saying. He set the bag down. Hi, Sasha. Hi, Joel. Still teaching high school English? Still renovating bathrooms? Different bathrooms. Same van, currently totaled. She laughed, and the room rearranged itself around that laugh into something that felt like a version of normal I hadn't had access to for over a year. I spent 2 nights in the hospital. Sasha spent most of the first one in the chair beside my bed, grading her students' essays on her laptop with reading glasses she'd started wearing since we broke up and hadn't been wearing when we were together. I mentioned this. I've always needed them, she said, without looking up. I just didn't want to get them. Why? I thought they made me look. She paused. It doesn't matter. You look exactly like yourself. She looked over the glasses at me. That's the most non-compliment compliment. I mean, you look like you, which is good, which is the point. She considered this, then went back to her grading. But she didn't take the glasses off, and she smiled slightly at her students' essays for the rest of the evening, and I was almost certain it wasn't entirely because of the essays. On the second morning, she brought real coffee from the place 2 blocks from the hospital. She remembered how I took it without asking. I didn't comment on that. I tucked it away the same place I tucked away the fact that she'd stayed. The morning I was discharged, my brother pulled up in his truck to drive me home. I expected Sasha to say goodbye at the entrance. She walked me out, stood on the sidewalk in the February cold, and watched my brother load the minimal bag of things I'd accumulated in 2 days. Dinner? I said. She pulled her coat tighter. You have to do physical therapy first, and see your doctor, and probably sleep for approximately a century. After all that, she agreed. Joel made a very deliberate show of checking something on his phone. I'd also like to call you, I said. Before dinner. If that's okay. Just to... I searched for it. Just to talk. Not about anything specific. Sasha looked at me for a moment. The February air lifted a piece of her hair and she reached up and tucked it back. That's okay, she said. Okay. And Owen. She stepped forward and adjusted the collar of my jacket with quick, practical fingers, the way you do for someone without thinking. Then she seemed to realize what she was doing and stopped. But she didn't move back. Call when you say you're going to call. That part matters. I know. I know you know. Her eyes met mine. Do it anyway. Every time, I said. She nodded once, stepped back, tucked her hands in her pockets. I got in the truck. Joel had the sense not to say anything until we were 2 blocks away. Well, he said. Don't. I'm just. Joel. He put both hands up briefly, then put them back on the wheel. He was quiet for approximately 30 seconds. You're going to call her tonight, he said. I know. Good. He merged onto the highway. Because I've watched you be an idiot about this for a year, and I have a lot of thoughts saved up. I'm in physical pain. I'll pace myself. I looked out the window at the city moving past, gray and cold and familiar. My shoulder ached with every bump in the road. My head was still doing something complicated. And underneath all of it was something steadier than I'd felt in a long time. Not certainty exactly, but direction. The specific feeling of knowing what the next right thing is, even if you don't know all the steps after it. I called her that night at 8:15. She picked up on the second ring. We talked for 2 hours about nothing specific. Her students, the grout color I was planning for a job in Bexley, a documentary she'd watched. The particular problem with the intersection near her apartment that I immediately wanted to report to someone. You can't call the city about every bad traffic pattern, she said. I can try. Owen. It's a habit. I care about infrastructure. You care about everything being organized correctly. A pause. I used to think that was separate from caring about people. And now? And now I think it's probably the same muscle. Her voice was thoughtful, just pointed in different directions. I sat with that for a moment. I'm pointing it at you, I said. For what that's worth. She was quiet for a second. It's worth quite a bit, she said. We had dinner 6 weeks later, when my shoulder had recovered enough that I could dry myself and wear a jacket without wincing. A small Italian place in the short north that she discovered after we broke up. We sat by the window. The risotto was good. She told me about a student who'd written an essay comparing the American Revolution to a group project where one person does everything, and I laughed hard enough that the table next to us looked over. I ordered the lamb. She ordered the gnocchi and ate half of mine. You always do that, I said. You always overorder. I order adequately. You underorder strategically. That's a very tile company way to look at food. I'm efficient. You're a good sharer, she corrected. Don't ruin it. I put my fork down and looked at her. Candlelight, crowded restaurant. Sasha with her hair down and a blue sweater I'd never seen before. And reading glasses she'd kept. What? She said. Nothing. I picked my fork back up. Just this. She looked at me steadily. Yeah, she said. This. We walked back to her apartment after because the night had turned mild in the way February sometimes surprises you. A break in the cold that doesn't last but matters while it's there. At her door, she turned to face me and I kissed her. There on the steps, with the streetlight and the city behind us. She kissed me back like she'd been deciding to for 6 weeks and was done deciding. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. Careful, she said, but she was smiling. Very careful, I said. Historic levels. She pressed her forehead to mine. I'm still keeping the conditions. I remember them. Therapy. Tuesdays. Actually showing up. Every time. And you don't get to. Her voice went a little quieter. You don't get to go quiet when things get hard. That's not allowed anymore. I pulled back far enough to look at her. I'm going to want to sometimes. I know. And when I do. I know that too. Her hand came up to my jaw, steady and warm. Just come back before I have to go looking for you. I will. I turned my face slightly into her palm. I'll come back every time. She believed me. I could see it in her face, not blind trust, not the easy kind, but the kind that costs something and gets given anyway. The kind that means something. We stood there on the steps while the city moved around us, unhurried and unconcerned, the way cities always are when something small and necessary is happening just off to the side of all the noise. A year later, I installed a custom kitchen for a couple in Upper Arlington. White oak cabinets, concrete counters, a tile backsplash in a pattern the wife had found in a magazine, and the husband had told her was too ambitious until he saw it finished and admitted he'd been wrong. Sasha came by at the end to see it. She walked around the kitchen slowly, running her hand along the counter, looking at the tile the way she always looks at things. All the way, not just the surface. It's beautiful, she said. It took 3 weeks longer than it should have. Because you redid the grout line in the corner. It was off by a millimeter. I know. She turned to look at me. That's not a criticism. I crossed the empty kitchen and stopped in front of her. Outside, the couple's yard was winter bare, waiting for spring. Inside, everything was clean and finished and exactly what it was supposed to be. I've been thinking, I said. About tile. About you. I held her gaze. About what I want the next part to look like. She went still. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, I said. I'm just telling you I've been thinking about it. Because you told me to come back before you had to go looking. And this is me. Coming back. Out loud, before I lose my nerve. Sasha looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached up and put both arms around my neck. Slowly. And leaned into me. I've been thinking about it too, she said against my shoulder. For a while. I held her in that finished kitchen, in someone else's house, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, and thought about how this was what waking up actually meant. Not in a hospital bed with monitors and questions and the ceiling coming into focus. This, opening your eyes to the right thing before you almost lose it for good, and choosing it again, every day that comes after. I used to think showing up meant being physically present, standing in the same room, answering when someone called. Owen was always there, at the job site, at dinner, technically accounted for, and he genuinely believed that counted. That's the part that took me a long time to understand about myself and about people like me. The absence wasn't about distance. It was about attention. About where your mind actually goes when someone is trying to reach you. Sasha didn't leave because Owen stopped caring. She left because caring, quietly and privately, and never out loud, turned out not to be enough. She needed to feel it directed at her, not at the next project, not at the invoice, not at the bad traffic light 2 blocks from her apartment. At her, and Owen, for all his attentiveness to the physical world around him, had never learned how to point that same focus at the person sitting across the table. That's a hard thing to see about yourself. Most people never do. They carry the story that they're a good person, that they work hard, that they're loyal, And all of that can be true and still leave someone alone inside a relationship. Character isn't just about intentions. It's about whether the people who matter to you can actually feel those intentions landing. Owen had the first part. He had to build the second. What I think about when I think about this story is the moment he sat in his truck outside her building for 45 minutes and then drove away. That's not cowardice, exactly. That's what happens when someone knows they have something true to say, but hasn't yet developed the discipline to say it before the moment passes. The courage was there. The follow-through wasn't. And courage without follow-through is just feeling. It doesn't change anything. He had to go to therapy. He had to sit with someone and learn the difference between being physically present and being emotionally available, and then practice it, Tuesdays, repeatedly, even when it was uncomfortable. That's not a dramatic act. It's a quiet one. It's the kind of work nobody sees. And it's also the only kind that actually moves things. Sasha had her own version of that work. Choosing to walk into that hospital room after 4 hours in the hallway, knowing she'd believe him, knowing that scared her, took something real. It would have been easier to stay outside. Easier to protect herself by staying distant. The harder thing was going in anyway, keeping her eyes open, and deciding to trust what she saw. That's not naivety. That's the kind of clear-eyed decision that only comes after you've already been hurt, and you choose to think carefully rather than just react. What they built after wasn't effortless. It was dinners and phone calls and therapy appointments and the ordinary discipline of showing up even when it's inconvenient. Loving someone correctly is less about the moment you say it out loud and more about the 100 small decisions after. Owen knew that by the end. The walnut table, the kitchen in Upper Arlington, the habit of calling when he said he would. Those weren't gestures. They were proof. I think about the overpass a lot. Not the accident itself, but the fact that he'd driven that road 100 times and never saw it coming. Some things are like that. You think you know the shape of your own life well enough, and then the ground shifts and you find out which parts of yourself were actually solid. The parts that were solid in Owen were always there. He just had to learn to use them in the right direction.